I do most of the stunts myself that I have time for. We had a sword fight in the first one that I got caught along the side of the arm. It's
For an entire generation of kids in the 90s, Saturday afternoons meant one thing: a broad-shouldered demigod in a leather vest, throwing men twice his size and cracking one-liners while he did it. Hercules. The legendary journeys felt simple on the surface. Monster of the Week, moral lesson, roll credits. But almost nothing about how this show actually got made was simple. Behind the scenes, there was a hidden medical emergency, a death that shocked an entire industry, a future Oscar nominee hiding under foam muscle padding, and a filming location that was picked almost by accident. Here are 20 things about Hercules that most fans never knew. By the time Hercules reached its 5th season, Kevin Sorbo had spent years doing his own stunts, throwing punches, and selling the illusion that nothing could hurt him. Off camera, something very real was happening inside his body. While the crew was shooting in New Zealand, Sorbo began noticing a strange, persistent pain running down his left arm. He assumed it was just the toll of physical filming and pushed through it, the way anyone playing a mythological strongman might. It wasn't until he got back to the United States and saw a doctor that the picture darkened. A lump was found in his shoulder, and the physician privately suspected cancer without telling him right away. Around the same time, a visit to a chiropractor left him feeling strange, and on the drive home his vision started to blur and his speech slurred. His fiancée rushed him to the hospital, where doctors discovered an aneurysm that had been quietly sending blood clots toward his brain. He had suffered 3 strokes. Sorbo spent 8 days in intensive care and months in rehabilitation, and by his own account it took roughly 3 years before he felt like himself again. Audiences at home had no idea that the actor playing an unbreakable son of Zeus was, at that exact moment, relearning how to trust his own body. A star who can barely stand is a serious problem for a series built around physical spectacle. Rather than quietly writing around Sorbo's reduced screen time, the writing team leaned all the way into the absurdity of the situation. The result was an episode in which an earthquake in Los Angeles causes the actor Kevin Sorbo to vanish from the set of his own television show, sending the fictionalized writers and producers into a panic as they scramble to find a replacement. When Sorbo eventually reappears, the story reveals a twist. He was never just an actor playing Hercules. He was Hercules the whole time, quietly living as a mortal in the modern world while starring in a dramatization of his own ancient life. It's a strange, funny bit of metafiction that only exists because a production crew needed a creative way to cover for their lead actor's declining health. And it remains one of the more inventive things a syndicated fantasy show attempted in the 90s. Kevin Smith, the New Zealand actor who turned Ares into one of the show's most magnetic characters, never set out to act at all. Rugby was his real passion growing up, and he was fully immersed in the sport through his teens and into university. A concussion sustained during a match sidelined him for weeks, and during that recovery period his wife spotted a casting notice for a touring stage tribute to Elvis Presley. She encouraged him to audition, mostly on a whim. He landed the part, and that single audition rerouted the rest of his life away from the rugby pitch and toward the stage, and eventually toward Mount Olympus. Once producers saw what Kevin Smith could do with the character of Ares, they used him everywhere. Between 1998 and 1999, Smith was simultaneously appearing as the god of war on Hercules, the legendary journeys, Xena, Warrior Princess, and the prequel series, Young Hercules. Juggling one recurring character across 3 concurrently airing television productions is an almost unheard-of scheduling feat, and it turned Smith into a genuine fan favorite on the convention circuit, with talk beginning to circulate that bigger film roles were within reach. That larger career never got the chance to happen. In February 2002, Kevin Smith had just wrapped filming on a martial arts film in Beijing when he fell from a height on set and suffered catastrophic head trauma. He was placed on life support, and his wife and parents flew to China to be with him. He died 10 days later, on February 15, 2002, at 38 years old, leaving behind his wife and 3 young sons. It remains one of the most sobering behind-the-scenes stories connected to the entire Hercules and Xena universe, a talented performer whose career was still accelerating when it was cut short. It's strange to think about now, given how iconic the character became. But Xena originated as a minor, disposable villain. She was introduced in a short story arc during the first season of Hercules, intended purely as a guest antagonist with no larger plans attached. Audiences responded to her so strongly, and the character had so much unexplored potential, that producers built an entire spin-off series around her almost by necessity, rather than by original design. Once Xena, Warrior Princess, launched alongside Hercules' second season, it didn't stay in its parent show's shadow for long. Within a matter of weeks, Xena was pulling in bigger numbers and generating more cultural buzz than the series that spawned her, eventually airing in dozens of countries around the world and becoming one of the most talked-about cult shows of the decade. For a franchise originally built entirely around one demigod hero, watching the supporting spin-off eclipse the flagship series was an unusual, and by most accounts, uncomfortable dynamic behind the scenes. When Fox greenlit a prequel series following a teenage version of the character, the original young Hercules from earlier Hercules episodes, actor Ian Bohen, chose not to relocate to New Zealand for a full season and passed on the role. The part went instead to a virtually unknown 17-year-old Canadian actor named Ryan Gosling. Because Gosling didn't yet have the physique associated with a young demigod, his costume and arm padding were specifically designed to make him look bulkier on camera. He filmed 50 episodes in Auckland before the series was cancelled after a single season. Long before The Notebook, La La Land, or Blade Runner 2049, one of Hollywood's most respected leading men spent a year of his teenage life swinging prop swords in foam muscle padding on a children's fantasy show. Gosling wasn't the only future name hiding in plain sight. Karl Urban played the god Cupid on Hercules and Julius Caesar on Xena years before becoming Eomer in The Lord of the Rings, and later a lead in Star Trek and The Boys. A young Rose McIver, who now headlines the CBS series Ghosts, appeared on Hercules as a child performer. Bruce Campbell became a franchise fixture as the recurring thief Autolycus, and also stepped behind the camera to direct several episodes himself. Looking back at the combined guest and recurring cast lists from Hercules and its spin-offs reads almost like a preview of who would shape genre television and film over the following 2 decades. New Zealand actor Michael Hurst, who played Hercules' loyal companion Iolaus, became something of a one-man ensemble across the franchise. Beyond his central role, he took on a long list of additional characters over the years, occasionally appearing under different billed names for particularly outlandish parts. His versatility became something of an inside joke among the cast and crew, since few other performers on the show could disappear into that many different roles across a single series and its spin-offs. Executive producer Sam Raimi, already a cult favorite for directing the Evil Dead trilogy, oversaw Hercules through his production company Renaissance Pictures, co-founded with Robert Tappert and Bruce Campbell. Running 3 interconnected fantasy action series out of New Zealand simultaneously, on a fraction of a typical studio budget, forced Raimi and his team to become remarkably efficient at large-scale visual storytelling. When Sony brought him on to direct Spider-Man in the early 2000s, Raimi carried much of that instinct with him, and Bruce Campbell's now famous cameo tradition across the Spider-Man trilogy traces directly back to their years working together in Auckland. The Hercules and Xena productions weren't just a professional operation. They became genuinely intertwined personal lives. Producer Robert Tappert married Lucy Lawless in 1998 while both shows were still airing, and Kevin Sorbo met his own future wife, actress Sam Jenkins, on set, marrying her that same year. For a franchise filmed thousands of miles from Hollywood, the cast and crew ended up building an unusually close, family-like community around the production. Before Sorbo ever appeared as Hercules on the syndicated weekly series, the character first came to life in a set of television movies in 1994. Those films cast the 2-time Academy Award winner Anthony Quinn, famous for Zorba the Greek, as Zeus, king of the gods. Quinn brought an unexpectedly warm, human quality to the role, and the tension and tenderness between Zeus and his son became one of the emotional anchors that carried over once the weekly series began. Before a single scene of Hercules was shot, producers spent months hunting for the right location, one that could deliver ancient-looking landscapes on a syndicated television budget. Several American locations were considered and rejected for not offering the right combination of scenery and affordability, and other Southern Hemisphere countries were seriously in the running. New Zealand ultimately won out because of the sheer range of terrain available within a short drive of Auckland, everything from dense forest to volcanic rock, all achievable at a fraction of the cost of shooting elsewhere. That decision ended up mattering far beyond one television show. Years before Peter Jackson ever scouted a New Zealand location for Middle-earth, Hercules and its spin-offs had already spent seasons training up a local pool of camera operators, stunt coordinators, and visual effects technicians. Many of the crew members who later worked on the Lord of the Rings trilogy got their start on the Hercules and Xena productions. What began as a scrappy, budget-conscious fantasy series ended up laying real groundwork for New Zealand's film industry to become a global production hub. Long before computer-generated creatures were standard on television, Hercules was already experimenting with them. Monsters like the multi-headed Hydra were built using fully digital effects at a time when CGI on that scale was mostly reserved for feature films with much larger budgets. The results look understandably rough by today's standards, but for mid-90s syndicated television, audiences had rarely seen anything like it, and the show's effects team had to invent workable techniques on a shoestring budget that bigger productions weren't yet attempting. By the time Hercules reached its 6th season, the show was canceled before it could finish, with only a handful of episodes completed instead of a full run. The reasons were partly business, but Sorbo's declining physical condition during the later seasons, something audiences were never told about at the time, had already reshaped how much the show could realistically ask of its lead actor. The series wrapped its television run in late 1999. After the main series ended, Sorbo returned to the role of Hercules one final time, not on his own show, but as a guest appearance on Xena, Warrior Princess, in an episode that aired in February 2000. It was a fitting, low-key send-off for a character who had spent 6 years as one of syndicated television's biggest stars, closing the book on the role in the very universe that had once launched from his own show as a supporting arc. Perhaps the most striking part of this whole story is how long it stayed hidden. Sorbo didn't speak publicly about the strokes and the aneurysm until years later, eventually detailing the experience in his memoir and in a series of interviews. He has since described how a mix of pride and fear kept him quiet for so long, and how far the gap really was between the confident, invincible hero fans watched every week and the man privately relearning how to walk without losing his balance. Maybe the strangest legacy of Hercules is this: a series built entirely to showcase one demigod ended up best remembered, in many circles, for the spin-off it accidentally created. Xena was never meant to outlast a 3-episode arc, yet she became one of the defining action heroines of 1990s television, syndicated across more than 100 countries, while the show that introduced her moved on to its own increasingly strange, meta, health crisis-shaped final seasons. Few franchises have had their most famous elements start out as an afterthought, and few origin stories are stranger than the road that got Hercules there. Which of these facts surprised you the most, and which one are you still thinking about? Let us know in the comments.